We now see that Trump will have a great deal of influence over what the NSA can do. Do you have any thoughts on that you'd like to elucidate on?
Yeah, so there's a number of things. First off, for people in the audience who may not be so familiar with Mr. Zimmerman's work, PGP is one of the original encryption schemes for email that I used in my original contact with the journalists. It's fair to say that the NSA revelations could not have happened in the way they did in 2013 without this man's work. So I have to say thank you very much for everything you've done, not just for myself, but for the world. But going on to the broader question here, I try not to look at this as a question of a single election or a single president or even a single government, right? Because we see these things, these threats coming across borders. We see the same thing happening in Russia. They've got this new surveillance law called the Yarovaya package. Russians call it the Big Brother law. In China, on the day of the election, the news was talking about how the Chinese had just passed a new mass surveillance law, and they got away with practically no criticism from the international community because they were clever enough to say that they had modeled it on the United States' own surveillance laws. And because our last two presidential administrations had been saying that these powers were so necessary, they were so valuable, and they didn't hurt anybody, now suddenly they can't criticize these other governments for doing the same thing. But this is a problem because even if you think, all right, well, you know, we want government to have authority and powers to be able to perform its legitimate tasks of securing the nation, of protecting our communities, of investigating crimes, right? But how is this done, and where do they depart from this model? When do they start creating exceptions to what we have in the United States, our Fourth Amendment, which is an individual's right to privacy, where they say the government can't interfere in your communications, they can't arbitrarily investigate your home or take your letters or your emails, either collecting them or reading them, without going to a court and getting a warrant. But we have to recognize that even that barrier, the warrant requirement, the involvement of courts, doesn't mean the same thing in every country. If you say, well, mass surveillance is fine as long as the court's involved, Kim Jong-un in North Korea will go, oh, this is fabulous, because you know what? I have courts too. And they'll be happy to sign anything I put in front of them. And this is really something that we need to remember, is we are never farther than a single election away from a change in government, from a change in policy, from a change in the way the powers that we have constructed into a system are used. And so what we need to start thinking about now is not how do we defend against a President Donald Trump, but how do we defend the rights of everyone, everywhere, without regard to jurisdictions, without regard to the borders. We have this tremendous fabric of technology that we've enveloped the earth with, this internet that creates bonds of fraternity between people who don't even share the same language. But this fabric of communications that was intended to empower citizens and individuals of communities and families is increasingly being used to disempower them. Internet service providers, phone companies, governments, and other corporations are beginning to spy on these things. They're lifting up that fabric to look at the lives underneath, whether it is for the purpose of profit, or whether it's for the purpose of power, or whether it's for, in some cases, legitimate purposes. But we have to think for ourselves, what if we start weaving this fabric in a slightly different way? What if we start changing that dynamic mechanism that we face in the status quo today, which means when you pick up your phone and you make a call to your mother, your sister, your husband, your wife, that call is transiting that global network electronically naked. Anybody can look at it, anybody can listen to it, anybody can read it. What if we change that so that it's protected by default? Every communication, every transaction you engage with is protected. And you don't have to take some activity. You don't have to teach a journalist how to use this sophisticated encryption program, even if it is 20 years old, and you hope that people should be able to get to use it at this point. Instead, we made this fabric work not just for Americans, not just for people in the Netherlands, but for the whole world. If suddenly we could not just support the human rights of people in Germany, France, Brazil, Iran, Russia, China, and America, we could enforce them. We could guarantee them through our technology. And I think this election reminds us that that capability is within our reach today. And we have not just the right to try, but the duty.